I spoke to a lot of people in different capitals in the fall, and a lot of people were like, well, you know, we did this before. We had a Trump administration before, and we managed it. It was difficult at times, but we survived, and after 4 years, sort of the normal order restored again. I think a lot of people have been shocked by just how extreme the administration has been in its first 50 days. And a lot of leaders are realizing that this time might be different, that they can't really wait it out, and that they really have to reorient themselves. In Europe, that means a lot of spending on defense, moving away from relying on American security guarantees and doing it yourself. And the same is true to some degree in Asia, where a lot of countries are trying to figure out how they will handle a much less reliable US security guarantee. So it will be a world that is in transition at the moment. It's not changing overnight. Like, you can't build up a defense industry in 1 or 2 years. It's going to take quite a lot of time. But it is a really fundamental shift in the way things work, in the way alliances are set up, in the way trade works, in the way everything kind of works in international relations.
That's a really large question, but what I would like to say is how important it is that academics get together to try to understand the current evolution of the world, which are very much striking, extremely shocking for some of us, and we need to rationalize a posteriori a lot of events. Academic expertise is definitely important, and I would say for us who do international relations, we have to focus on one important thing: to make a link between the evolution of domestic politics in each country that we're looking at, and to link these domestic political evolutions to international relations trends. There is no border between what happens domestically and at the international level. And also, for all of us, we're not historians. We really try now to focus on history, trying to see and understand if what is happening right now is just a continuity of former trends, or really there are big ruptures, and which kind of ruptures does that mean? And probably lastly, we try as much as we can to decenter our perspective, not to be in our little bubble. And a lot of us disagree on what is happening right now. But we are all, concentrated on the importance of bringing the academic expertise and building bridges with policymakers. So, it's our responsibility, and we try to have our part.
So, American politics, I think, is evolving in a direction that is more authoritarian and pushing back or reversing some of the principles that American politics has stood on for a long time, the liberal principles of openness, freedom, and so on, affecting the human rights of people who are based in America. And I think this has an effect internationally in terms of reducing the legitimacy of America's role in the world. And I think that other countries that have long engaged in these practices are now have more leeway, in a way, or more freedom to perhaps repress their own citizens, because the country that has stood for freedom and human rights in the world is now turning on itself. It also opens up more space for other actors to undermine America's role in the world by essentially exposing the hypocrisy between the words of America and the deeds that it commits. And so in some sense, there's a real risk that acceptance of American power, what we might call legitimacy in the world, it will be on the decline. And this will open up space for much more contestation between those on one side of this debate and those on the other.
I think it's best to see the Trump revolution in American foreign policy and global order as a sort of hostile takeover of an American-led order that has been evolving over the last 80 years. So think of it as America Incorporated, a company that has existed for 80 years after World War II, the liberal international order, far-flung, many different dimensions to it, economic, security, political, and so forth. And the Trump administration has come in and now is, in effect, the CEO of this American Incorporated order, and is, as a kind of hostile takeover, doing things to undermine it, to shed responsibilities, to leave international organizations like the WHO and the Paris Climate Accord, to squeeze allies, to monetize relationships, to charge more money, so to speak, for allies and partners, and to unbundle old bargains between the US and Europe, US and East Asia, to pursue trade tariffs while simultaneously pushing allies to do more in security. So it's a new, brave new world, literally, of an American system that is more predatory, more illiberal, more antithetical to a global international order based on international law and multilateralism. Do I think it has a future? No, not in the middle term or long term. I think that there are too many people around the world that want to live in a more open, rule-based, cooperative order, and the international problems of the 21st century require a very different reform of the global system, moving in a very different direction than what Trump is offering Americans and what he is offering the world.
The new Trump administration in the White House has delivered a new strategy when it comes to dealing with Europe, and Europeans need to be prepared for this. The Trump EU doctrine is based on three main points: to minimize, to misunderstand, and to promote merited punishment. So first of all, the Trump doctrine seems to be that Europe is weak, but not weak enough. As a result, they are considering withdrawing US troops from Europe and really challenging a whole ladder of deterrence, as well as the architecture, the security architecture for Europe. Second, this idea that the European Union is weak, that the European Union does not have what it takes to defend itself against external threats, is something that the Trump administration seems to want to deliberately misunderstand. The fact that the European Union looks the way it does and the interdependencies that Europeans have with the United States are also based on how the United States has created the European community all the way back to the end of the Cold War. So that the fact that Trump is not aware that the results of the European security, economic, and social and political architecture are also intertwined with what the United States wanted to see happen in Europe throughout the last 70 years is, I think, a deliberate agenda to meet the first point I was also speaking about, which is to minimize the role of Europe in international affairs. And finally, this is all done in the name of apparent merited punishment. If there were a way to sum up what the Trump administration thinks about the European Union, would be, to quote President Trump, that the European Union was created to screw the United States. And this is a very different change of perspective compared to where we were in our rhetoric and in our partnership just a few years back. If they've decided that Europeans are not allies, we are at best some kind of low-intensity users of American benevolence, then the Europeans need to be aware and shape their strategies accordingly. So to conclude, I think that Trump's first principle of the art of the deal is to think big. But Trump's impatience will outpace his ambitions. And Europe has no choice but to go for deliberate resilience, not just survival.
Okay, I think what we're seeing at the moment is probably the biggest crisis that we have ever seen in the relationship between the United States and Europe. So one of the immediate things that we're seeing is a rapid deterioration of what's called the transatlantic relationship, which is basically the relationship that is holding together Europe and United States, and which is kind of acted through in NATO. So what we're seeing in the short term, I think, is a weakening of NATO and a disintegration of or at least a very severe alteration of the transatlantic relationship. More long term, I think what we're seeing is that Europe and the United States will actually start to have their own spheres or their own international orders, where we probably will see Europe as continuing the liberal international order with the values underpinning that order that has been traditional so far, whereas America looks much more like it is going in an illiberal direction that is probably going to be a very different kind of order than what we have seen over the last 80 years. And I think it's important here to remember that the liberal international order was built by and for the United States. So the fact that the United States is now actively undermining this order, which actually has served the United States very well over the last 80 years, is really quite astounding.
So my research looks at US-China relations and how the relationship itself has shaped and been shaped by the capitalist system. And I think the current changes happening within US politics, the escalation of capitalist interests within the White House, the real privileging of those, are starting to throw into question the ways in which great power politics between the US and China might continue to preference capitalist interests, for example, in AI, over the expense of labour and over the expense of those who may be affected by these sort of great power dynamics unfolding in AI. So for me, I think one of the big things to be focusing on is how great power competition and its impact on the AI race might have unintended consequences for global labour, not just in the United States, but more broadly as well.
So my research is mainly on populism and the far right. So what I think is most important about the impact of the United States on global politics is how Trump's brand of nationalism, libertarianism, and reactionary politics are going to affect advanced economies. In the run-up to the election, there was a received wisdom that if Trump was going to win, that this would strengthen the far right and populist parties elsewhere in advanced economies and specifically in the world. There's a question whether or not that's true. It's quite obvious that in the immediate aftermath of Trump's election, European far-right parties and European populist parties have been surfing on Trump's success. So we can see that they've been meeting in various European capitals, they've been developing links between one another, they've been referencing Trump. But I think that there may be other things going on as well. It's quite obvious that nationalism of the kind that Trump wants to apply to his relationships in terms of trade, in terms of politics, are things that are going to rattle the supporters and the voters of the European populist parties. And so my sense is that what we might see is an initial boost from Trump's arrival to power, but then actually a very difficult line to walk for some of these European parties. For example, when Trump tries to apply tariffs to European commerce, this will hurt precisely those voters who will be voting for Marine Le Pen in France. When Trump wants or will demand of Hungary that, for example, Orban decouple from his relationship with China, this is a very difficult choice for Orban because China is actually Hungary's most important foreign investors. What I'm saying is that these parties will be caught in a situation where they will be faced with a trade-off. Remain a part of a European unity, remain a part of the EU with the defenses that come with it, or actually gamble on a relationship with someone like Trump, who's a bit mercurial and who can change his mind at the drop of a hat. I think that we see that somebody like Giorgia Meloni, for example, is trying very, very hard to keep her relationship with Europe intact and to maintain her relationship with the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, but at the same time, she's also trying to deal with Trump and trying to enter into deals with Musk. And we can see that even the Italian population is not terribly thrilled with the idea, for example, of a Starlink contract with Musk. So the trade-offs for these parties in the world that Trump is constructing might actually be much more of a problem for them than a help. And I think that that's something we need to keep in mind and to see how it evolves over the next few months.